Morning began with the taste of rust and ash on my lips. I opened my eyes, feeling every muscle in my body aching with a dull, exhausting pain, as if someone had beaten me all night with iron rods. Under my fingernails, black, greasy soil had dried and crusted, and on the pale skin of my forearm, a fresh bruise darkened, shaped like the grip of some enormous hand. I forced myself to get up, blaming it on another episode of sleepwalking that had been haunting me for the past month. Turning on the icy water in the bathroom, I scrubbed my hands with a stiff brush for a long time, trying to wash away the sticky, suffocating feeling of someone else's presence. From the living room came the monotonous mumbling of the morning news. I stepped out of the bathroom, drying my hair with a towel, and froze in front of the screen. The news anchor, with a detached expression, reported a brutal murder. The body of Victor Crow had been found at an abandoned construction site outside the city. It had been torn apart beyond recognition. Forensic experts spoke of an attack by a wild animal, possibly a bear that had escaped from a private menagerie. The man was identified only by the remains of an expensive suit and a personalized watch. Victor, my former boss, the man who had turned my life and the lives of a dozen other female employees into an endless psychological hell. The one who reveled in his impunity, destroyed other people's careers for amusement, and enjoyed other people's tears. Hearing the news of his horrific death, I did not feel a single drop of compassion. Somewhere deep inside, a strange, frightening sense of satisfaction stirred, and a cold, bone-chilling shiver. 4 days later, the nightmare repeated itself. This time the victim was Anna, the woman who had fraudulently taken my elderly neighbor's home, throwing her out onto the street. Anna's body was found in the city park, her fingers clenched around a torn handbag. The police were no longer talking about a wild animal. Panic began spreading through the city, newspapers screaming about the appearance of a brutal maniac, imitating the habits of a beast. I listened to these reports while sitting on the floor in my bedroom. My gaze wandered aimlessly around the room, until it caught on the back of a chair where the jacket I had worn the day before was hanging. From the pocket, a thin gold chain had half fallen out, with a pendant shaped like a garnet heart. Exactly the same one. Anna had never taken off her neck. My heart skipped a beat. I slowly walked to the chair and picked up the chain with trembling fingers. Dark, thick blood had dried on the golden links. A ringing filled my ears. My breath caught. I rushed to the wardrobe, began frantically emptying the pockets of other jackets, turning bags inside out, digging through the drawers of the dresser. At the bottom of my old backpack, buried under receipts, lay a heavy platinum tie clip, Victor's clip. I remembered it. He always spun it in his hands when he was scolding someone in his office. And under the bed, crumpled into a tight ball, lay a man's shirt soaked with a dried brown crust. The air in the room suddenly became heavy as lead. I stepped back until my spine hit the cold wall and slowly slid down it to the floor. I live alone. The door is always locked from the inside with 2 complicated locks. The windows are on the 7th floor. No one could have broken in and planted these things. Memories of the last nights of the full moon were as if cut out of my mind with a dull knife, leaving only black, viscous voids, and waking up in sweat, with torn knees and the taste of metal in my mouth. The monster the entire city was searching for in fear was not hiding in the woods or abandoned basements. It slept in my bed. It looked at me from the mirror. I began analyzing these fragments of facts, trying not to go insane. The creature inside me did not touch random passers-by. It flawlessly tracked those who radiated cruelty, those who caused pain, who destroyed other people's lives, and walked away unpunished. My curse worked like a blind, primitive mechanism of justice, tearing the throats out of those the law could not reach. But I did not want to be an executioner. I could not live knowing that every full moon night my hands turned into lethal claws and spilled blood. The line between me and the monster was becoming thinner and thinner. What if one day the beast broke free from control? What if I became angry at a random person on the street and the monster decided he was guilty? I felt that dark, boiling rage living under my skin even during the day, waiting for its time. The decision came by morning. It was crystal clear, icy, and left no room for doubt. I had to break this chain. I did not write any farewell notes. I simply put on a clean dress, left the house, and headed for the tallest building in our district. An unfinished 20-story business center. I climbed the dusty concrete stairs to the very roof. It was a bright, sunny noon. A cold wind tossed my hair, drying the tears on my cheeks. Below, in a dizzying abyss, cars and people bustled like tiny colored dots. They hurried about their business, never suspecting that directly above them stood a monster, ready to free them from its presence. I stepped to the very edge of the concrete slab. There was no fear, only endless, deafening exhaustion from fighting myself. I closed my eyes, took one last deep breath, and stepped into the void. The sensation of freefall lasted only a moment. The wind whistled in my ears, the ground rushed closer. I waited for the saving impact that would switch off the light and end this nightmare forever. But the impact never came. Reality exploded with unbearable, all-consuming agony. My body refused to die. The monster inside, sensing a mortal threat, instantly burst out to protect its vessel. Right in midair, my bones began to break with a nauseating crunch and change shape, lengthening and thickening. The skin on my back and arms split at the seams, releasing thick, coarse fur. My muscles swelled, tearing the light dress to shreds. My lower jaw pushed forward, my teeth turning into wet, razor-sharp fangs. I tried to scream, but from my transformed throat came only a deafening, guttural roar. I crashed not onto asphalt, but onto the roof of a parked armored cash transport van. The thick metal crumpled beneath me like foil, armored glass bursting outward in a spray of fragments. I stood on the roof of the mangled vehicle on all fours, breathing heavily. People around screamed, dropping their bags and running away in panic. I looked at my gigantic, fur-covered paws with black, curved claws. Sunlight burned my eyes, unaccustomed to the light. The beast was not tied to the night. It was tied only to the instinct of survival. I could not kill myself. The curse had made me invulnerable, turning my suicide attempt into a public demonstration of the monster. As soon as the first shock of the transformation passed, the adrenaline began to fall. My body convulsed again with the reverse transformation. A few minutes later, I, back in human form, naked, covered in cuts and someone else's blood, slid off the twisted van and ran into a narrow alley, fleeing from the distant wail of police sirens. Where can someone go whom even death rejects? Only there, where salvation from any evil is promised. Snatching a man's shirt drying on a line in someone's yard, I ran until I saw the heavy oak doors of an old Catholic church. Bursting inside, I collapsed to my knees directly onto the stone floor. The church was dim, smelling of incense, melted wax, and dampness. 3 priests stood near the altar. They turned around, startled by the crash of the doors. I crawled toward them across the stone, leaving bloody handprints behind me. Gasping, interrupting myself, I told them everything. About the belongings of murdered people I had found, about the black gaps in my memory, about the jump from the roof, and the beast that awakens inside me to punish and survive. I begged them to perform an exorcism, to lock me in the church's dungeons, to chain me with consecrated chains, to do anything at all to stop this horror. The head priest, a tall, gray-haired man with cold, expressionless eyes, slowly approached me. I looked at him with hope, expecting a prayer or words of comfort, but there was no compassion in his eyes. There was only icy, paralyzing animal fear and fanatical hatred. He stepped back and quietly threw out a short phrase in Latin. The other 2 priests instantly rushed to the entrance, and with a heavy metallic clang, slid the bolts across the oak doors. The trap snapped shut. I slowly rose to my feet, feeling the dark, viscous rage beginning to boil again inside me. Meanwhile, the gray-haired priest pulled from a hidden niche beneath the altar a long blade covered in ancient script and a heavy black revolver. Creatures like you have no place in the house of the Lord. His voice treacherously trembled as he raised the weapon and aimed the barrel at my chest. You are spawn of hell, corruption, and we will cleanse this earth of your presence. They had no intention of helping me. They themselves were killers, hiding their cruelty behind sacred texts. They were ready to cold-bloodedly shoot a person who had come for help, simply because they feared what they could not understand. A shot rang out. The deafening blast filled the church. A silver bullet pierced my shoulder, throwing me backward. A burning, paralyzing pain flared through my body, but it lasted only a fraction of a second. The pain became a detonator. The feeling of betrayal, injustice, and direct physical threat tore away all internal restraints. The monster no longer needed to be restrained. It had been given a legitimate target. I didn't even have time to scream. My bones exploded from within. The sound of tearing flesh drowned in my many-voiced, vibrating roar, from which the ancient stained glass windows beneath the church vaults began to shatter. The priest fired again, but the bullet only ricocheted from my rapidly thickening frontal bone. My elongated, clawed paw shot forward. With a single, effortless strike, I threw the shooter toward the altar. Wood cracked, marble statues of angels shattered into fragments. The other 2 rushed at me with blades, screaming, but to the beast they moved far too slowly, incredibly slowly. The church filled with the sounds of breaking bones, choking breaths, and the thick, suffocating smell of fresh blood. The monster inside me knew no mercy for those who hid their rotten essence behind beautiful words about salvation. Within a minute, everything fell silent. I stood in the center of the destroyed altar. Breathing heavily, I felt hot blood running down my muzzle and dripping onto the stone floor. Slowly, with painful effort, the beast began to retreat, returning my human form. I collapsed to my knees among the shards of stained glass, trembling from cold and shock. Around me lay the torn bodies of those who were supposed to carry the light. A silver dagger lay in a pool of blood, bent in half by the blow of my paw. I lifted my eyes to the shattered crucifix on the wall. A curse cannot be killed. You cannot escape it by jumping out a window, and it cannot be driven out with prayers. I looked at my hands. They were covered in blood up to the elbows. And for the first time in all this time, I did not feel panic. I felt icy, absolute calm. It seemed that for the first time in a long time, I truly felt good.